Recently, through my wife's friend, I accidentally discovered that she had been unfaithful for the past 20 years. I decided to end our marriage. My wife, 47 female, and I, 46 male, have shared 20 years of marriage, and our journey began when we were high school sweethearts. She was a senior, and I was a junior. For the first 2 years of college, our relationship developed long distance while I finished middle school and attended community college for a year. We eventually enrolled in college in the same city and have been inseparable ever since, living together and building our lives. We married the summer after my college graduation, and overall, our marriage has been wonderful. However, I recently initiated a divorce after uncovering that she had been involved with multiple men during those 2 long-distance years. Just after Christmas, we had a small reunion with a few of my wife's college friends. It was such a lovely evening. We had such a good laugh and had so much to talk about when we got together for dinner. During the conversation, my wife casually mentioned that we met in high school. She didn't go into detail about the whole dating thing. She just said that we had known each other since we were teenagers. One of her old college roommates said how amazing it was that we met so young, had such a fun college life, and still ended up together. I played along, teasingly saying I wasn't sure if my wife was as spirited as I had been. At that moment, the roommate began to share a story, but my wife cut her off, saying she felt uncomfortable. Her reaction made me wonder what was going on in her head. I decided to clear things up and mentioned that we actually started dating in high school and remained together throughout her entire college experience. After a little while, everyone sat there quietly, and the rest of the evening felt a bit awkward and tense. As we were leaving, one of her other roommates came up to me and suggested I should have a little chat with my wife about what really happened during her college years. On the way home from dinner, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling I had, so I asked my wife about what her roommate had hinted at. She kind of brushed it off, saying it wasn't a big deal. I told her it was important that she be honest with me, but she brushed it off again, insisting it wasn't important. But I felt uneasy, and her dismissive attitude only made me more suspicious. When we got home, I decided to take a firm stand. I told her I was going to stay at my brother's house until she was ready to talk about what had really happened during her college years. The next day, she came over, looking a bit nervous. She finally admitted to sleeping with several men during her first 2 years of college. She tried to play down the significance of these relationships, explaining that she didn't see them as a big deal at the time, because we were long distance and she wasn't sure if our high school romance would last. When I heard this, I was absolutely gutted. I asked her more about it, and I felt angry and let down. She confessed that it was at least 10 different men, including at least 3 guys she had introduced to me as friends during my weekend visits, and 1 guy she was still in contact with. When I heard this, I felt so many emotions, including anger, sadness, and betrayal. I knew our marriage just couldn't survive this. I told her I wanted a divorce and would start the paperwork as soon as possible. I started the process on the 2nd of January, as I'd promised. I could see that she was trying to make her actions seem less serious and dismiss my feelings, but I knew that this only made my decision stronger. I knew this wasn't just about the infidelity. It was about the lies and the disrespect that had spanned decades. Her family and most of my family are telling me not to give up on my marriage just because of a few mistakes. They keep reminding me that everyone makes mistakes and that I should forgive her for the sake of our long history together. But I can't help feeling that there's more to this than a few little missteps. It's about a pattern of behavior that spanned years. Cheating on me with multiple men for 2 years is not something I can overlook, no matter when it happened. I also found it very disrespectful that she continued to see these men, even introducing them to me as friends. Our children are 17 and 19, practically adults, and I believe they will understand why I need to end the marriage. They've seen us as a loving couple, and I hope they realize that my decision is about preserving my self-respect and integrity. I feel like I'm losing my mind with the number of people telling me to overlook years of infidelity and decades of lies. Everywhere I turn, I hear people urging me to forgive and forget, to salvage what we've built. They tell me I'm being unreasonable, that I should focus on the good times and the life we've shared. But how can I, when every memory is now tainted by the knowledge of her betrayal? It's not just the cheating, it's the deceit, the lies, and the fact that she's still friends with those other people. How can I ever trust her again? I'm struggling to see her the same way again, especially knowing what she did and how she dismissed my feelings when I confronted her. I keep asking myself, is this how I really feel? Am I being too hard on her? But then I remember the pain I felt when she admitted to her affairs. I remember how angry and hurt I felt. I remember the sleepless nights spent wondering how she could introduce me to those men. I just can't get my head around how she could do that without feeling any guilt. It's not something I can simply get over. It was a really difficult time, and it's had a huge impact on our marriage. I'm not sure if I'm wrong for leaving. I don't think so. I feel like I'm fighting for my dignity. I just feel like I have the right to not be lied to. I just feel so disrespected. It's not about seeking revenge or holding a grudge. It's about recognizing that once you cross a line, it's gone, and there's no going back. I'm writing this because my wife and a few of her friends have been telling me it's normal to sleep with other people in a long-distance relationship, and that I'm the odd one out for not doing the same. I felt like they were trying to gaslight me, and I really needed to get an outside perspective. Since we live in a state with a waiting period to finalize a divorce, I thought it would be wise to get some insight before things are set in stone. After hearing these comments, I see a handful of people agreeing that it's common to sleep around in long-distance relationships, but they seem to be in the minority. When we were in college, we saw each other a couple of weekends a month. I lived about 3 hours away from her college. So, while it was long distance, it wasn't like we were separated by the entire country. We didn't go months without seeing each other, which I think is really important. The 3 guys I met while she was in college were introduced to me during parties. These weren't formal introductions, just casual meetups at social gatherings. We never really talked about me being her boyfriend, so I've got no idea if they knew we were an item. One of these guys is still in our lives because he married a mutual friend from college, which is really lovely. He's not some secret crush she's been texting on the sly. He's someone we've both been in touch with regularly for years. After my wife's infidelity came to light, I spoke to him a few times to understand his perspective. He said he had no idea we were dating back then, and has since blocked my wife on social media out of respect for me. Some people have asked how her college roommates didn't figure out the timeline at our wedding, but that's just the way it was. The answer to that is that we handled our wedding celebrations in a certain way. My wife and I had a very small ceremony with just close family in Texas. Later, we went back to the East Coast and threw a big party for our friends. We decided to skip the typical wedding reception traditions where couples share details about how they met and their journey together. Because of this, her roommates never pieced together that we started dating before she went to college. They just thought we'd started dating in the year we both lived in the same city and then moved in together. This meant that they never questioned the timeline or suspected any infidelity, which I think is really understandable. I was always up for trying therapy or whatever it might take to save our marriage. I really believed that with a bit of work, we could get through this. But her constant insistence that what she did was perfectly normal and that I'm the one who's overreacting has been too much for me to handle. She keeps telling me that sleeping with other people in a long-distance relationship is commonplace and that I'm being unreasonable. The only time she showed any remorse or even offered to reconcile was when I started filing the divorce paperwork. But that was short-lived, and now she's back to her usual self, saying she's right and I'm overreacting. This back and forth is why I feel like I'm being gaslit. It seems so obvious to me that her actions were a major betrayal, but I've got my wife and others telling me that it's normal and that I'm the one who's making a big deal out of nothing. I'm doing my best to understand, but her dismissive attitude is making me feel confused and frustrated. I tried to explain how much her infidelity hurt me, hoping she would understand how serious it was. But instead, she downplays my feelings, dismissing them as an overreaction to something so trivial. It feels like she's rewriting the rules of our relationship and expecting me to just go along with it without question. It's so frustrating to feel like my emotions are being dismissed like this. It feels like I'm being manipulated into doubting my own perceptions and feelings. I don't think it's fair that she's acting like it's no big deal, and it's really hurting me. It's not just the cheating itself, but her inability to recognize why it's a big deal and why I feel so betrayed. I just need to look after my own mental and emotional well-being. I can't go on in a marriage where my feelings are dismissed and my trust is shattered. I'm really sad to say that her lack of genuine remorse and her insistence that I'm the one who's out of line make it impossible for me to see a path forward together. I'm sure I'm not overreacting. I just want to be treated with respect and honesty. I'm not getting a paternity test unless my kids ask for it themselves. I have no doubt about their biological connection to me, and even if a test showed otherwise, it wouldn't change how I feel about them. I love them more than anything, and even though my wife has been unfaithful, that doesn't change the fact that they've been my kids for 19 years. They will always be my kids, no matter what, until the day I stop breathing. We were definitely exclusively dating at the time. First of all, dating culture was a lot different 20 years ago, and exclusivity was pretty much the default for most people. There wasn't this whole open relationship or casual dating mindset that seems to be so common nowadays. Back then, if you were with someone, you were with them alone. Second, before she left for college, we had a long and difficult conversation about maintaining our relationship long distance. It was a tough conversation, but she was determined to stay together. She even joked that her dad would come after me if I started sleeping around with other girls at my school. That joke was a big deal, showing how serious she was about us staying faithful to each other. Another clear indicator was the situation with my senior prom. She couldn't attend because she was away at college, and when I suggested going with a platonic female friend, she got very upset. Her reaction showed me how much our relationship meant to her, and how we were exclusively together. To avoid hurting her feelings, I ended up skipping my prom and spent the night hanging out with her instead. While we might not have used the word exclusive, all these things showed how much we cared about each other. We all knew that being faithful was really important to us, and we talked about it a lot. I spoke to a friend who suggested I should have a chat with my wife. She revealed that 10 guys would be on the low end, and mentioned that there was at least one pregnancy scare during those years, which I had no idea about. I have to say, the number of guys isn't really the main issue for me. What I really need to talk through with my wife is why she doesn't seem to understand how her actions were wrong and why I feel so deeply betrayed. It would be really great if she showed any desire to fix this, but she hasn't. She kept dismissing my feelings, saying I was overreacting to what she saw as normal behavior. It was only when she realized I was serious about filing for divorce that she expressed any regret or consideration for the hurt she caused. It was only then that she got defensive and angry. But even then, it was clear that her concern was more about the consequences than about my feelings. It was really sad to see, because she didn't seem to care at all. She didn't offer to fix things or suggest how we could work through it, and that was really tough for me. It wasn't about fixing our relationship. It was about damage control. I'm worried that her response shows she might not fully understand how serious her actions were. It's not just the infidelity, but also her ongoing lack of respect for my feelings and our marriage. I tried to explain to her how serious I was taking the situation, but she just didn't seem to understand. In the end, I had no choice but to start the divorce process. I'm sure we can manage co-parenting. Our kids are older now, and I've been saving for their college and post-high school expenses for years, so I'm sure we can manage the financial side of things. We're both in good places financially, and we both earn good incomes. I'm open to therapy if she's up for it, but right now, it feels more about us becoming effective co-parents and finding some closure. I've already taken steps to move forward with the separation. I've even hired a lawyer to draft some documents about our intention to separate, and I've sent them to her via certified mail. This isn't an official divorce document yet, just a way to show her that I'm serious about working things out. It's just a preliminary step to make sure she has the chance to hire her own lawyer if she wants to challenge it. The divorce process itself is likely to take several months. I'm not fully moved out yet, but I'm doing my best. I've been staying at my brother's place while I figure out a more permanent living situation. The dinner with her friends was on the 26th. That night, I went to my brother's house to cool off and give her some space to reflect. Over the next few days, we had some really good chats, and it became clear that she didn't think she had done anything wrong. If she'd shown any kind of remorse, regret, or just basic consideration for my feelings, I might have reconsidered and waited. But unfortunately, her dismissive attitude left me no choice. So I found a divorce lawyer, and we quickly filled out the standard intent to separate agreements, which were sent the same day. Even now, we're not officially divorced, and I'm not sure if there's a legal term for being separated in my state. I've explained to him that we're going through this process and he's started the necessary steps to move forward. Update 1. Now, let's take a moment to talk about what I learned about her college years. After chatting to my wife and 2 of her former roommates, it became clear that they had suspected something was amiss back in college. They said that something just didn't feel right, and that it probably had something to do with cheating. My wife had told them that we both had some wild times in college, but had worked things out before we got married, so they never felt the need to bring it up. But then, during dinner, one of the roommates came up to me and said that she was really uncomfortable with the fact that my wife hadn't talked to me about this. She felt like I deserved to know. As for the men she was involved with, it turns out that the introductions to some of these guys weren't intentional. One of the guys she slept with ended up dating and eventually marrying one of our mutual friends from college. This was the guy she remained in contact with. My wife initially tried to shift the blame onto me in our counseling sessions, suggesting that I had pushed her into those situations. But she's since said it wasn't right. When I visited her during college, she often planned for us to stay in her room or hang out alone. But I was really keen to experience college parties, as I had missed out on that during high school and community college. She didn't expect me to meet the guys she had been with, but they were often at these parties and she felt she couldn't avoid it. I still think it was really disrespectful, but it's not as bad as if she had introduced me to them. The whole situation has been a bit of a tangled web of half-truths and omissions, which makes it all the more difficult to process. Her friends suspected but didn't intervene, and my wife managed to keep up this facade for years. Most of our therapy sessions have been about why I see her infidelity as a big betrayal, while she doesn't. At first, she explained her actions by saying that none of these men were in relationships with her. They were mostly just one-night stands or friends with benefits. She didn't see them as a big deal because they weren't romantic relationships. I'm not sure how she sees it though, because she doesn't seem to see it that way. From my perspective, the nature of the relationships wasn't the issue. We never agreed that such behavior was acceptable. She even tried to stop me from doing the same. It was a bit of a double standard, which made me feel a bit let down. As we talked about it more over the course of 2 therapy sessions, and after she had a chat with some friends, my wife began to see things differently. She now understands that her actions were a breach of our trust and the foundation of our relationship. This new understanding has allowed us to talk about things more openly and honestly, which has helped us move from heated arguments to productive conversations. This new dynamic between us is giving me so much hope for our future as co-parents. While it might feel like saving our marriage is out of reach, being able to talk openly about our past can help us build a healthier relationship moving forward. This is so important for our kids and for us working well together as co-parents. So, here's the deal. I'm 100% set on getting a divorce. 2 really important things came to light that made it clear I needed to end the marriage. First, about 10 years ago, we hit a rough patch and went through a period of almost 2 years without any intimacy. She had mentioned that our physical relationship was becoming monotonous, so I tried to spice things up a bit. Nothing too extreme, just a bit of light role play and items you'd find at a novelty store. But it turned out she was still fixated on some intimate experiences from her college days, which she is not comfortable discussing. She wanted me to recreate those experiences, but when I did, it made her feel awkward and guilty because it reminded her of other men she had been with. I know it's hard for her to talk about, but I think it's important that we understand what these experiences mean. Secondly, she admitted to having a bit of a flirty moment with her colleagues during business trips since the pandemic ended. She says that nothing physical happened, but they did go on a date together. For me, that was the last straw. I felt so hurt when I found out, and I just couldn't trust her anymore. The first issue showed me that past experiences were still haunting our present despite her claims otherwise. The second issue made it clear that she was willing to cross boundaries again, even after everything we had been through. When I put the 2 together, it just didn't feel like there was any hope for our marriage. We've told our kids that we're getting a divorce. We explained to them that it was because of some bad decisions we made at college, decisions that we've been unable to move past. During a heart-to-heart, my 19-year-old, who's currently in college, asked me straight up if I'd been unfaithful to my wife while she was away at school. This was a bit of a shock for my wife, but she was brave enough to admit to our children that she had cheated. We've both agreed that it's best for now to keep the details to ourselves. It's so important to protect them from the more painful aspects of our past. I told them that even though we're not together anymore, we're both 100% committed to being there for them. I told them that we're seeing a therapist to make sure we do the right thing for our family. I also told the kids that they can always talk to us or a therapist about how they feel, and I'll be there for them. I want them to know they can express their feelings and seek help without any hesitation. It's so important for them to know that their emotional health is our top priority, and we're doing everything we can to make sure we get through this as a family. We've started talking to a mediator to see what the best way to go about the divorce is. Unless something unexpected comes up, it seems like we'll be able to part ways as friends. We're both in good places financially, with no major debts, and our kids are all grown up, so the custody part isn't a big deal. I know the last few months have been tough for us both, but I'm doing my best to get through them. I'm so grateful for all the support and attention my last post received. It really validated my feelings and motivated me to seek counseling with my wife. To be fair, my 19-year-old daughter has had her share of difficult relationships. She's been hurt by boyfriends who either cheated on her or abruptly left her for someone else. Given her past experiences, it's totally understandable why she might have thought that I was the one who cheated. I was the one who left the house, which might have added to her suspicion. Seeing her dad leave the family home might have seemed like he was hiding something. I guess her past experiences have made it easier for her to believe that I could be at fault. When the topic of cheating came up, my wife was quick to own up to her actions. I'm not too worried about the story behind it. I'm glad to say that as far as I know, my wife hasn't said anything negative about me to our kids. I have to say, I was surprised by her recent admissions of flirting and cheating, but I have to admit that her readiness to file for a joint, amicable divorce after just 6 weeks and 3 counseling sessions did make me realize that she was more prepared to move on than I was. This makes the divorce easier on her because she doesn't have to deal with as much paperwork, but it is a little sad to see her having an easier time moving on from a 20-year marriage than I am. I think she might already have a new partner. When we met with the equitable divorce mediator, she made it clear that we're still married until the divorce is finalized, and any infidelity before that could potentially affect our friendly settlement. I found this a little ironic, given that our own divorce was also caused by infidelity. My soon-to-be ex looked a bit annoyed when we talked about it. I also think that the fact that I'm still living with her might be getting in the way of her moving on. I'm doing my best to come to terms with the end of our marriage. I've been doing my best to deal with it all by going to therapy on my own, as well as in couples sessions. I'm trying not to worry too much about the possibility of bumping into the colleague she only dated again, but I'm really hoping I'll find a new place and move out before the divorce is finalized. If everything goes smoothly with the mediator, we should be divorced by summer, which will be a great step forward for us both. I'll have my own place, and she can just date whoever she wants. Update 2. My wife and I have finalized our divorce, and everything is now official. We're very happy to say that we had a very amicable and uncontested divorce, with very few disagreements. Our lawyers worked together to draft the plan through mediation, and a judge signed off on it a few weeks ago. It was a smooth process, and I'm happy to say that it couldn't have been easier. The only slight bump in the road was with our 17-year-old, who was determined to stay with me because of the changes in their relationship with my ex-wife. Initially, my wife was hesitant, as she was ready to challenge the uncontested divorce. But our son made it clear to her that he could either stay with her for a few months while he processed and rebuilt their relationship, or he could leave, and they wouldn't see him again until he turned 18. I thought my son was a bit too direct, but it did the trick, and my wife eventually agreed. We agreed that I would have primary physical custody until his birthday later this year. I've been doing my best to encourage my son to stay open and to keep in touch with his mother. I told him how much I know she cared for and loved him for 17 years, even though she had acted a bit silly before he was born. As the divorce proceedings went on, I noticed my son spending more time with my ex-wife, which made me feel really hopeful that they will get back together again. It's been a tough time for all of us, but I'm staying positive and hopeful that, with time, they'll be able to rebuild their bond. In the end, we split our retirement funds and investments equally, 50-50. My wife really liked the house, whereas I didn't, so she kept the house and most of the furnishings. To balance things out, she took out a mortgage to pay me back for half of the equity and half of the estimated replacement value of the furniture. Most of the rest of our stuff was easy enough to split. She kept her car, and I kept mine, and we divided our personal items like my music gear and her hobby equipment, along with clothing and personal effects. For anything that was a bit more tricky to divide, we just agreed to sell it and split the profits. Thankfully, we had already documented most of our valuable items and electronics. For an insurance writer, we added to our home insurance a few years ago, which made this process a lot easier. Things have been going really well for me personally. Both of my kids spend most of their time at my place, and we have maintained a close relationship, which was my biggest concern during the divorce. I'm so relieved and grateful that this bond remains strong. I've even moved into a new house that I absolutely adore. It feels like a fresh start. And, in a nod to my midlife crisis, if you can call it a crisis, I treated myself to a sleek Lexus LC550. I have to say, it's brought a surprising amount of joy. I was really happy when a lady from work asked me out for coffee. She works in a different department, so we don't work together. I was honest with her and explained that I'm not ready to date just yet. She was so kind and understanding and graciously offered to wait for me. She said that she would be happy to go out with me when I'm ready. I was so touched by her kindness and thoughtfulness. She's incredibly smart and has a great sense of humor, and our professional roles are far enough apart that there's no awkwardness at work. My ex and I are still going to couples counseling, but now the focus is on closing the book on our marriage and making sure we can co-parent in a positive way. These sessions have been so helpful in helping us process everything and make sure we're all staying positive, even though things haven't gone the way we expected. They've also confirmed that divorce was the right decision. It's become clear from our chats that my wife started dating as soon as the divorce was initiated, which suggests that whatever love we had was already fading. I think the coworker she said was just a friend even dropped her off at our recent session. I have to say this didn't upset me at all, which I think is a really positive sign that I too was ready to move on from the marriage. Healing from the betrayal is going to take time, but I feel like I'm making good progress and can confidently say that the divorce was the right choice. I've had my fair share of tears in the last 4 months, but I've also been feeling good about myself for the first time in ages. I'm enjoying my newfound independence, staying busy helping my 17-year-old prepare for college in the fall, and looking forward to a coffee date with a smart, funny woman in a month or two. I've learned so much from the journey of our divorce, especially the value of honest communication. Looking back, I wish we had been more transparent with each other from the start. If we'd been more honest with each other from the start, it would have prevented some of the pain we both ended up feeling. I'll carry this lesson with me in all my future relationships, both romantic and otherwise. I've also discovered a strength within myself to rebuild and move on. I've started to feel really good about myself again, despite the heartache. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't yet subscribed, I'd really love you to go ahead and do that. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can keep abreast of all the latest real-life stories.